We're joined now by NBC News national law enforcement correspondent Tom Winter, along with former prosecutor Susan Filan. Also with us, Reuters White House correspondent Jeff Mason. Okay, so Tom, as we anticipate, the DOJ will be meeting with Maxwell today. How could this go down?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. First off, it's going to be Todd Blanche, who's the Deputy Attorney General, who's going to be at this meeting, according to our reporting and our colleagues at the White House, Monica Alba and Kristen Welker. So that's who's going to be doing the interview. The question is, what's going to come out of it? By the way, we should mention that Blanche has said on a podcast that he's friends with Maxwell's attorney, so he certainly knows the counsel here. I just want to read to you a couple of quotes that have come out of court filings or in court proceedings over the last couple of years. The defendant's willingness to brazenly lie under oath about her conduct, including some of the conduct charged in the indictment, strongly suggests her true motive has been and remains to avoid being held accountable for her crimes. This coming from a judge. Ms. Maxwell today acknowledged the courage of the victims, talked about the pain and anguish they expressed, to some extent acknowledged the pain and suffering. What wasn't expressed was acceptance and responsibility. That was at the sentencings for Ghislaine Maxwell, the judge who oversaw her criminal case. So prosecutors, the judge, all acknowledging either a lack of truthfulness here from Ghislaine Maxwell in the past, or somebody who hasn't accepted responsibility for their crimes. Remember, in the course of the search warrant that was executed, in the course of her arrest at the New Hampshire home, she apparently used a false name to purchase that home. Agents, once they got past her private security, actually had to break in through the house because she was looking out at the agents, refused to come forward. And then they found her cell phone wrapped in tinfoil in what was really kind of a haphazard and ham-handed attempt to avoid surveillance, according to the court paperwork at the time. So this is somebody whose relationship with the truth, including the initial 2 charges of perjury in the indictment against her, that she lied in the course of a deposition, a civil deposition that was taken in 2016. Somebody who prosecutors and others associated with the case have said has a real problem with the truth. What she offers today is really a big question. And the fact that investigators went through all of her background and past and chose not to engage in a plea negotiation with her, we know that from statements in court, and she didn't ask for a plea negotiation or a plea deal initially either in the course of her case or at any time. So it really raises a question as to exactly what this meeting is all about.
And so, Susan, if you are the person doing the questioning, what are the key questions to ask when you approach Maxwell? And would you have concerns about her credibility?
Well, the key questions to ask are, is there any new information on the one hand? And on the other, what can you tell us about what is in those sealed proceedings that the judge has decided cannot be unsealed after the DOJ asked for them to be unsealed? Her lips are not sealed. She can speak. And so if people want to get at what's in those proceedings, ask Ghislaine. Now, is she going to be truthful? Well, on the one hand, she has nothing to lose. She's been sitting in prison for 5 years. She, I would believe, wants to get out, wants to cut a deal, wants leniency. On the other hand, she hasn't shown herself to be truthful or credible in the past. But what she tells us now is going to be very easily corroborated by external evidence, part of what's in the DOJ files and other evidence that's available to investigators now.
So could she cut some kind of a deal retroactively? So if she gives new information, if she is helpful to shining new light, could she stand to benefit in some way?
Yeah, she could ask to be resentenced. She could ask to have her sentence modified. She could ask for leniency. She could ask for better conditions in prison. But she could also face new prosecution if she talks about new evidence that could reveal new crimes. So she could take the 5th, and it would be a big 0, or she could be an absolute Pandora's box.
And I want to bring in NBC's Julie Sirkin at the Capitol because, Julie, meantime, the House has also now subpoenaed Maxwell. They want to talk with her. The DOJ is also likely to get a House subpoena for the Epstein files. Walk us through all these actions happening on the Hill.
Yeah, and it isn't just the House. I'm standing behind me, actually, is a Senate committee that is meeting this morning. Obviously, the House was sent home early, so they are not in session. Senator Rick Scott, for example, said his constituents also want to see the files. So if there's anything in there, go release it. That's what he said. But back to the House, there are some real divisions. And you mentioned that subpoena to Ghislaine Maxwell. That's a move coming from Congressman Tim Burchett. He offered the motion earlier this week. Swiftly did James Comer, the top Republican on the oversight panel, actually sign that subpoena. and issue it to Maxwell. And then yesterday you had a situation where a motion offered by a Democrat, Summer Lee of Pennsylvania, to get the DOJ to force them to release the files unredacted, to put them in the hands of Congress. That is something that went through yesterday, and they expect Comer to sign it just as swiftly. When you talk about Maxwell and what else she could glean to this investigation, what other information somebody who's already sitting behind bars can provide, that's a question that we posed to Burchett himself. Here's what he said.
She is a liar, and she's a dirtbag. And
so then why subpoena her if you can't trust her?
Well, because the one thing we got holding over her head is if we find out she lies, she goes back to her original sentence, and that's looking at lifetime. And if she's looking at maybe parlaying this into reducing her sentence, then we could have some leverage there.
What would you ask her?
I want to know the chain. I want to know the money. I want to know the people involved, and all gloves are off.
So that deposition is set to move forward in August, where she is in prison in Florida. But aside from that, you have some real divisions here, Anna, among Republicans about how to proceed with this. And it's very clear that despite the president saying multiple times there's nothing to see here and that this issue should go away, even blaming Democrats like Johnson is at times for keeping it alive, it is clear that Republicans themselves are keeping this issue alive because their base in the MAGA sphere want them to.
Okay, so Julie, because there's so much happening there on the Hill, I just want to get this straight. You've got this subpoena for a Maxwell deposition happening. There's also, right, a separate call to subpoena DOJ officials for all these other Epstein files they may have access to, in addition to potential questioning of former administration officials. Explain what that effort is looking like, what that could mean.
Yeah, so for all the ways that the Speaker and Republican leadership in the House tried to stop this from happening, it didn't quite work. They might have sent the House early. They might have told the Rules Committee, that first stop that we were talking about, that any piece of legislation has to move through before it hits on the floor. But they couldn't stop individual Democrats and then individual Republican members from joining them in these motions. And that's what we saw happen yesterday, again, in that Oversight Committee that a day earlier voted to subpoena Ghislaine Maxwell. Yesterday, that motion I was telling you about, offered by Pennsylvania Congresswoman Summer Lee, that was supported by some Republicans. Two of them actually voted to subpoena DOJ officials to force the release of those Epstein files, unredacted, may I add, to the committee. It doesn't mean they're going to just be put out to the public. It means, though, that the committee, Democrats and Republicans, will have some oversight of an issue that the president himself, the Republicans on the campaign trail, exasperated into what has become a conspiracy theory. And so yesterday you had Lee offer that motion. Republicans joined her. But here's the catch. You mentioned other officials. They also want to hear from Hillary and Bill Clinton, Loretta Lynch, William Barr, officials that were under the Obama administration, under the Biden administration, but also dating back to Clinton terms, because Republicans want to see all of this out there. As Rick Scott told me, he has questions about these Epstein files, but he also has questions about what he called the Russia hoax. So you see how Republicans are trying to put everything out into the ether. But all in all, definitely Republicans up here who want answers, and their MAGA base is leading them to ask those questions here, Anna.
Okay, lots to keep track of. Thank you so much, Julie Sirkin. So, Jeff, the House on track to subpoena the DOJ. Does that put the Trump administration in a bind as they're trying to move on from Epstein?
I think the second part of your question is the key issue. President Trump has been trying to move on for weeks. He's shown frustration both with his base, with the fact that this story just keeps going. He's tried nearly to use nearly every tool in his toolbox that have worked before, from distraction to scolding to just coming up with other things to divert people's attention, and it hasn't worked. And I think the politics of this is also particularly fascinating because it is not Democrats who are fanning the flames, although they're certainly doing everything they can to exploit this controversy. It's his people, and it's his base, and it's the people who put him into office. Fascinating that they're drawing a line on Jeffrey Epstein, and the frustration that he has about it is showing. It's showing in the fact that he has scolded reporters about it. He's exasperated by the fact that this just doesn't go away.